My name is Rodney Ashlock, and on behalf of Clifford's family, I want to say thank you for being here. And on behalf of Westgate, you are most welcome to be here. We do not take your attendance lightly at all. It says something about Cliff that so many are here, and as we are painfully aware right now of the dangers and risks of being together like this, but your love for him is tremendous, and so we are very, very happy that everybody has come here to pay tribute, to remember, to perhaps smile, perhaps cry, to do a little bit of a lot of things as we spend some time remembering today. Many of you may have noticed there's a lot of red and black in the auditorium today. I got the memo. I read the note very, very carefully. And I want to share a little story about Cliff that means a lot to me. For those family members who may not know who I am, I was the preacher here at Westgate. Cliff and Deb coming here, and one of my great joys, my memories, is Cliff coming in on Sunday morning. I could always tell how Tech did on Saturday based on his body language on Sunday morning. And if I got the head bob, things didn't really go that well, and sometimes we'd have to talk about maybe needing a new defensive coordinator or something along those lines that would go the language there. But one of my great memories while being a minister here is a day that Cliff and I drove up to Lubbock. You may not know this about me, but I was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Don't hold this against me. My dad graduated from the University of Arkansas and worked for the university for over 30 years. So I kind of like the Razorbacks. And so if you follow college basketball, they have this Big 12 SEC matchup every year where they pair a team from each of the conferences and they play. And that usually gets announced during the summer, and then the game's played in January of the following year. And it came out that Arkansas was going to play Texas Tech in Lubbock. And Cliff and I had gotten to know each other for a little bit here. And so one Sunday morning, I just kind of addled up to him and said, hey, have you heard about the basketball game? And I don't know that he had or not, but it didn't take him long to put two and two together. I said, the University of Arkansas is coming to Lubbock. You don't happen to have any connections there? And he just smiled, that Cliff smile, and said, I think I might be able to work something out. And so we got to go to that game in late January. And I remember that drive quite a bit. Had a good time. He pulled up to our house, and we got in. And, of course, I guess being the driver's ed, he wanted to be the one who drove, I guess. So anyway, we drove, and we did a lot of talking on the way to Lubbock and back that day. But I remember on our way up, we were talking about different things and his different stops where he had coached, and he would tell me stories about these small Texas towns. And when you coach, you're also kind of the groundskeeper. You do a lot of little things here, and we got to talking about things. And I said, I think I mentioned to him something that if I wasn't preaching, I think I wouldn't have minded being a coach. Now, he's driving, and he's a driver's ed instruction, so I want to kind of make everybody be sure that he just gave me some brief glances, but he kept his eye on the road there. But he looked over at me very, very briefly, and he said, Rodney, don't take this the wrong way. You'd have made a fine coach, but you're an excellent minister. You're doing what God wants you to do. And I thought I was supposed to be the one who was kind of ministering to Cliff on the way up, but I remember those words that he said to me. And they meant everything to me when he said those words. It is one of my fondest memories of being here, is seeing Cliff. Smile. Always wanted to talk, always encouraged me, and I appreciate that. We're going to spend some time today remembering, and Bud Turnage is going to read the obituary. Steve Stovall, the song leader here at Westgate, a small group will be singing a song, and then after that song, children and family members, anybody who wants to, I know of at least two that want to say a few words today. I think they may be saying it together to try to get through these things. But they're going to do some remembrances, and anybody from the family is welcome to speak that would like to at that time. Then we'll have another song, and then I'll be up here again, and I'll try to do a little bit better job with my composure at that point in time. But say a few more words, and then we will close with prayer, and then we will have a chance for everybody to pass by on their way out after that. And so turn it over to Bud Turnage, brother-in-law.
You know, Coach was one of those guys that the minute you met him, you just really loved him. He was just a really nice guy. He was awesome. But my fondest memory of him was when he decided that he was going to teach me how to play golf. And he didn't realize what kind of handicaps he was working with until we got out there. But I would, tee off, and he would say, "Chili dip, bud. That ball went a long way." The wrong way, but a long way. Then he'd do that little smile thing. We had a lot of fun out on the golf course, he and I. He continued to coach me and let me play with him, even though he knew I was not good. Clifford Smith loved sports. He was a gifted athlete that turned his passion for athletics and coaching into a life that impacted numerous individuals beyond the playing field. A leap year baby, Clifford Lee was born to Charles and Maida Smith on February the 29th, 1948, in Littlefield, Texas. He was a husky boy, and his uncle Homer commented that he was a buster. And that name stuck with him throughout most of his childhood, and all of his childhood friends knew him as Buster Smith. He was the only child for 6 years before his brother Charles was born, followed by Glenn and then Terry. Clifford always played or watched sports, but as a child he really loved baseball. Much to his mother's dismay, he often snuck out of school to watch the World Series, especially if the New York Yankees were playing. He played sports for Littlefield Wildcats before graduating in 1967, and he often told his children about trying out for the New York Yankees after high school. He did not make the cut, but the organization considered him a prospect and wanted him to hone his skills. Instead, like many of his peers, he saw the Vietnam draft looming, and he opted to join the United States Army. He served as the financial clerk at Frankfurt, Germany, but because of his athletic ability, he was also on the football, baseball, and bowling team. As the quarterback for the Tascan Titans, he led the team to the European Theater of Operations League Championship. He said his time in Germany made him truly appreciate the beautiful sunny days in West Texas. After his service ended, he attended South Plains College on the GI Bill before continuing his education at Texas Tech University. This is when his lifelong love for the Red Raiders was cemented. He enjoyed all Texas Tech sports, but the basketball team of the 1970s created great memories for him. He was also a big fan of Going Band from Raiderland. In 1972, he married Janice Benham, and their first child, Michelle Elaine, was born in January of 1973. 3 sons followed: Jeffrey Chad in November of 1974, Jeremy Lee in May of 1981, and Andrew Landon in December of 1984. Michelle, Chad, and Jeremy are all Red Raiders, which are considered a great parenting accomplishment for him. His first coaching job was at a junior high in Crest, Texas. That was the start of his 42-year career in Texas public education. He coached and taught in Hale Center, Demet, Merkel, Slayton, Quanah, and Abilene. He married Debbie Dennison on December the 31st in 1997 and added daughters Micah and Ramey to his family. In 2003, he became the athletic director and dean of students at Lincoln Middle School. He retired from Craig Middle School in 2015. He and Debbie were active members of the Westgate Church of Christ. His passion for sports continued into retirement. He loved playing golf. He played nearly every week and even volunteered at the Maxwell Golf Club course in exchange for some time on the course. He marked attending the Masters off his bucket list in 2014, and he always had his clubs in the back of his truck just in case. Coach, as he is affectionately known to his grandchildren, died from complications of COVID-19 on December 20th, 2020. He had no underlying conditions and was a very fit and healthy man. He was preceded in death by his father, Charles, in 2005, and his mother, Maida, in November 2020. He was heartbroken by the death of his son, Andrew, in 1985. Mourning this devastating and unexpected loss are his wife of 23 years, Debbie, his three brothers and their spouses, Charles and Susan Smith of San Antonio, Texas, Glenn and Kim Smith of Edmond, Oklahoma, and Terry and Jackie Smith of Littlefield, Texas. His children and their spouses, Michelle and David Hoagland, Casey and Chad Smith, and Jeremy Smith, all of Lubbock, Texas. Michelle, Micah, and Josh Donahue, and Ramey and Mason Yarbrough of Abilene, Texas. He is forever in the hearts of his 9 grandchildren, numerous nephews and nieces, countless former students, athletes, fellow coaches, and friends. His family asked that you please wear a mask when you're out in public and practice social distancing. These measures can help reduce the risk that members of our community will not pass away unnecessarily and leave loved ones heartbroken and devastated.
There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore by and by. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. We shall sing on that beautiful shore the melodious songs of the blessed, and our spirit shall sorrow no more. Not a sigh for the blessing of rest. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore by and by. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. To our bountiful Father above, we will offer our tribute of praise for the glorious gift of His love and the blessings that hallow our days. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore by and by. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore.
My name is Chad, and I'm Clifford's middle child, oldest son, starting guard for Coach Smith's basketball team in Quanah in 91, 92, and 93. If any of you have seen my South Plains transcripts from the fall of 93, you'll know public speaking is not my strong suit. But catcher, Caden Cohen, earmuffs, C's get degrees. If there was ever a time to try again and redeem myself, I feel like this is it, no pressure situation. I know there are a lot of teachers listening, and I expect A's from anyone grading. I have rehearsed this a lot over the last few days in my mind. I go through it every time, but there were always a lot of tears. I will get through it this time. I'm not afraid. I want to share a few quick stories about my dad. Times I learned something from him, most of the time I didn't even know he was teaching me a lesson. When I was in 5th grade, basketball games between father and son could get pretty intense. Intense, but generally all the competitiveness of the Globetrotters and the Washington Senators. My dad was an excellent basketball player, and 10-year-old me did not pose much of a threat. He could have skunked me every game, but he didn't, and I don't ever recall him letting me win. What he did do was force me to compete, to try my best on every bounce of the ball, and fight for every point. And when my frustrations would reach their peak, he would call a foul on himself and put me on the free throw line. He would tell me free throws are important, and you have to make them no matter what is going on in the game, no matter how frustrated you were. I'd be on the line, and he'd be back under the goal. 2 bounces of the ball, spin it backwards, on the goal the whole time. I'm going to make these free throws and be right back in this game. This was driveway basketball, and it's important. Bend my knees right before the shot, and right before the shot was released, Dad would pull his shirt above his head, and he would yell, "Belly button defense." It got me every time. I would laugh and relax and end up playing better basketball. Dad wasn't afraid to be silly in order to keep things fun while teaching me his lessons. Dad wasn't afraid. The summer before I started high school, Dad had a summer basketball camp. Yes, another lesson on the basketball court. I loved summer camp, and I always wanted to be the best on the court. We were playing 5-on-5, and Dad was reffing when I collided with a defender. Our knees hit, and I went down in a lot of pain. Much to my dismay, I didn't get the whistle, the call was not made, and the defense got the ball and got an easy layup. I looked up at my dad, and he asked if I was hurt or was I injured. Of course, I asked the difference, and he educated me on the facts. Hurt, you get up and you keep playing. Injured, he'd sit me on the bench and I could rest for a while, probably the rest of the day, and I could watch the games. I was not going to sit down, so I got up and kept playing. The pain was pretty real, but after a while it faded and was non-existent when my team won the scrimmage. Afterwards, he came up to me to finish the lesson. "You're not going to get all the calls, son. When you get knocked down, get back up and keep going. Keep fighting for what you want." Dad wasn't afraid to kick me in the butt and push me to do better. Dad wasn't afraid. Like a lot of kids, my 6th grade year was not easy for a whole lot of reasons. So many things were changing, and I was trying to figure out my place in an ever-changing junior high world. Sometimes my attempts to skip out on school were not Oscar-worthy. One morning, my complaints of not feeling well were falling on deaf ears, but I would not be denied. More than anything, I think Mom and Dad were not interested in the fight. After assuring them I would not be missing any tests or any sort of important assignment, they agreed to let me stay home from school. Victory was mine. I knew everyone's school schedule, so I got my stay-at-home snacks and started watching The Price is Right. Much to my surprise, Dad made an unscheduled trip home, and it was not difficult to see that my symptoms had subsided and I was feeling much better. Much to my surprise, Dad brought in a pizza and a movie. I still remember the movie to this day. It was Silverado, and he told me this was the Westerns he grew up watching. It had one of the greatest openings of any movie, and it had great one-liners. Dad loved quoting his favorite movies. If you ever heard him say, "I don't want to kill you and you don't want to be dead," or "All I did was kiss the girl," these were from Silverado. He put the movie in the VCR. Boys, I'll explain what a VCR is later. And he handed me the pizza and said, "It's okay to take a day off, but tomorrow we get back at it." Dad wasn't afraid to let his guard down and remind me that even though life is hard and we need a break from time to time, tomorrow we get right back at it. Dad wasn't afraid. Our first year in Quanah was not always smooth. We didn't win very many football games, and basketball was not going any better. To top it off, I was 17 and did not have my own car. Can you imagine the nerve of my parents not delivering me a brand new Chevy Blazer like I had requested? Anyway, I was stuck riding home with Dad after our road trips. And for a coach's son in a small town, that meant waiting for everyone to unload the bus and climb into their cars and go home. Then we clean the bus and head back to the bus barn. Stuck in my pity party 17-year-old boy world, I never thought of the bad time Dad was having with the team struggling to find victories and that he had to drive the bus home. We would pull up to the bus barn. I would unlock the gate so he could pull the bus into the barn. Then I climbed into the truck and waited on him. I would sit there just sulking and losing and not happy that I didn't have my car. Dad climbed in, backed us out, and then looked at me. Driver doesn't shut the gate. With a huff, I throw myself out of the truck and go shut the gate. I grab the end of the gate and push it closed, fumble with the frozen lock, and then get the chain around both poles. Pull the links across each other, slide the lock in, and seconds before I lock it, Dad has the nerve to honk the truck at me. Now I'm really mad. I'm not going to look at him. He's tried to scare me, right? So I pick up the freshly dropped lock, and I match it up again right, and right before I lock it again, another honk. This isn't funny. I look up through the fence at my dad, and he said, "Hey, son, you want to get on this side of the fence, or you're going to stay in the barn tonight?" I now see my mistake, and Dad's laugh falls into the Quanah night. I quickly open the gate, and then pull it closed and lock it tight. I get in the truck, and Dad is still laughing. I'm still acting like it's not funny. Then a quick grab of my left knee and a few friendly pokes in my ribs, and my frustration turns to laughter. That ride home was one of my fondest, father and son laughing and talking. Dad wasn't afraid to show me that I was being a honyok, one of his favorite words, and that you can't take things too seriously. Dad wasn't afraid. There were a few stops along the road for my family before Jeremy arrived. One of those stops was Dimmitt, the first go-around, and life on Ruskin Circle. I was around 6 or 7, Cohen's age, and our family was having friends over. It was probably Tom and Peggy Johnson. Anyway, we're in the living room, and all of a sudden there was a loud scream, lots of yelling, and the word that no one wants to hear, snake. There was terror in our house, and do you know what? Dad was afraid, very afraid. He was the loudest scream, and he was quickly on the highest ground he could find. Mom corralled the vicious beast. He measured an intimidating 6 inches long, and his smooth green skin signaled it was either a python or a grass snake. The beast was taken out of the house too fast for us to be sure which. Dad climbed down from his strategic viewing position, and the night continued. Dad wasn't afraid to show me that he was terrified of snakes, and to this day I follow his exact belief that snakes are evil. Dad was afraid, and that was okay. One of my favorite father and son events were our trips to the state basketball tournament in Austin. We'd leave on a Wednesday and spend the rest of the week in basketball heaven, 15 games over 3 days in March while the bluebonnets bloom is pretty perfect. We'd hit up Rooster's Athletics store, far too much burnt orange for us, and we'd always manage lunch at Thundercloud Subs or walk with the crowds to Brick Oven Pizza. It was the best guys trip you could ask for. One particular trip, it wasn't the trip to Austin, but the trip home that was eventful. For one reason or another, the fuel gauge had not been monitored as closely as it should have been. Those of you who had Coach Smith for driver's ed find this hard to believe, but we were running out of gas. Dad caught the problem, and somehow there was a gas station on the hill behind us, so he quickly turned the car around. As we started back up the hill, the car sputtered to a stop, and we pulled to the shoulder. It was official. We were out of gas. Dad let out a chilly dip, told us to stay in the car, and off he walked up the hill. Jeremy and I, being the excellent sons that we were, waited until the door closed before we started laughing. We had not stopped by the time he returned, and Dad's frustration level had not improved either. We both jumped out of the car to continue laughing while Dad poured the gallon of gas into the car. We even took the time to snap a few pictures of this historically funny event. At least it was historically funny to us. Dad finished up, and we drove to the top of the hill to top the car off. He didn't say much as we continued giggling. I know he probably wanted to wring our necks or tell us to pipe down, but he didn't. He took his ribbing and eventually laughed with us. Dad wasn't afraid to laugh at himself and showed Jeremy and I that lesson on the trip home. Dad wasn't afraid. In September of this year, I got a call from Dad. At first, it was our typical phone conversation. How are the boys? How's friendship doing in football? What's wrong with tech? But I could tell there was something else on Dad's mind. He then asked if I had Apple TV, and he went on to say, "You know Opie Taylor?" "Yeah, Dad, I know Ron Howard." Well, his daughter has a new show premiering on Apple TV. It's a show about her dad and dads in general. He'd seen the preview, and it looked like good stuff, and I told him I would check it out. A couple of weeks later, he called back, and he asked if I'd watched the show. I told him I hadn't got around to it. He told me I really needed to watch it. He watched the whole thing, and that it was a really good show on fathers and their kids. This was not our normal discussion on shows. Most of the time it was about war movies or westerns, something along those lines. Dad went a little deeper. "Chad, this show reminded me a lot about the type of dad you are. The things you do for your boys. You do a lot of things I wish I would have done. You're a good dad, Jeffrey Chad. I hope you know that." That call on a random weekend, out of the blue from my dad, that made my 2020. Dad wasn't afraid to surprise me and build me up at the same time. Dad wasn't afraid. December 20th, 2020, I put on a pale yellow protective robe, blue gloves, and shoe booties. I mask up one more time to say goodbye to Dad. I am afraid. Afraid of a world without my dad. It's a goodbye that's come far too soon than it was supposed to. It's not time for my dad. Still too much to do and say. I hold his hand and I brush his hair. I whisper words that I was not ready to say. Dad opened his eyes, and we both knew it was time. Dad, you're a great dad, and I love you very much. Dad wasn't afraid.
Thanks, Chad. That's awesome. I'm glad I get to follow that. I am Michelle Elaine Smith Hoagland. I'm Clifford Smith's first child. My dad called me Miss Pooh Elaine because he had a nickname for everyone. And if he had a nickname for you, it's about to come out, so you boys better prepare yourself. I want to share a story with you that was told to me while my dad was sick. One day in the early 70s, a little boy named Charles went to an elementary PE class in Levelland, Texas. He was not expecting anything exciting. However, when he arrived, his teacher said they had a very special guest joining them. It was none other than San Francisco 49ers quarterback John Brody. Now, for those of you who might not know that name, John Brody retired as the third most prolific career passer in NFL history and was the league MVP in 1970. Like, he was legit. The kids in the PE class were a bit skeptical. Was John Brody in Levelland? One boy said, "If you're John Brody, you have to throw as far as John Brody can throw." Mr. Brody said, "Not a problem. Go long." And the kid ran out. John Brody said, "Go longer." The kid went longer, and he went, "No, go longer." And the kid went way far out. And then John Brody threw the ball over his head. Well, there was no doubt that John Brody was in their PE class. A few weeks later, Charles was at home when he heard a knock on the door. To his amazement, John Brody was at his house. Mr. Brody said he was there to go on a date with Charles's oldest sister. Charles could not believe his luck. He ran to his sister's room and he said, "You're going on a date with John Brody." And his sister looked at him and he said, "What? No, I'm not. That's a guy I met in class. His name is Clifford." And that is how my dad met my uncle. Now, it's been said we are the sum of the parts that we play in life. My dad played many parts and was known by many names depending on the situation. He started out as Clifford, but soon that got changed to Buster because it was the 50s and everybody had a nickname. He was John Brody for a hot minute, but eventually he became known as Coach. But to me, he was just Dad. And my dad was an athlete. The John Brody story is just one of many times he amazed people with his ability to throw a ball. He was also a fantastic bowler. My mom says he could pick off pins one by one. But he wasn't just good at playing those sports, he understood them on a completely different level. We would be sitting at a Little League baseball game. I obviously pay attention when Spencer is batting, but after that, my attention may wane a bit. Not my dad's. We would be carrying on a conversation, and he would say, "Hey, Spencer needs to move to the left. This kid has hit to the left side for the last 3 at-bats. They're 10. He's like scouting out Little League 10-year-old players, telling Spencer where to go because of where they're going to hit. He could also teach the game. When Spencer started playing baseball, sometimes he would stand at the plate with his bat waiting for the perfect pitch and be so frustrated when he struck out. His dad and I would try to tell him, "You can't wait. You got to swing. You can't wait. There's no perfect pitch." Spencer wouldn't listen. One day, after a game, my dad said, "Spencer, do you catch a ball with a glove?" And Spencer said, yeah. And he said, then catch that ball with your bat. Worked like a charm. Spencer's a power hitter now. Lesson learned, direction from coach goes much further than direction from dad. And as Chad talked about, he had the greatest defense ever. It was belly button defense. Whenever we were playing basketball and he would want the ball, he'd just lift his shirt up, shake his belly like a bowl full of jelly. It worked every time. And he would also stand under the goal when you were shooting a free throw and use belly button defense. If you could make a free throw with that kind of distraction, well, I was terrible at free throws, and I blame belly button defense. My dad was a Red Raider. Did you guys know that? I attended my first Texas Tech basketball game when I was about 8 weeks old. What were my parents thinking taking a newborn to a basketball game? I knew Fight Raiders Fight before I knew the national anthem, which I also learned at a baseball game. When I was in my early 20s, I had a pretty significant surgery. As I was in the room coming out of the anesthesia, the nurse would say, "Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me." And I would give her a thumbs up. And the next thing I would hear was my dad saying, "Michelle, we don't do gig 'em. You give her a guns up." My very first job after graduating from Texas Tech was in the athletic department. My office was in the south end zone with huge windows overlooking Jones Stadium. On game days, they allowed my family to sit in the office and watch the game. My dad would open the big windows and greet the people walking below him, kind of like the Pope, right? He loved that office, loved that office. My next job could have been President of the United States, and when I walked him into the Oval Office, he would have said, the other office was better. In another job I had at Texas Tech, I was responsible for making the university commercials that ran during athletic events. He was always my target audience. The most successful campaign we ever developed was called "Every Day I'm a Red Raider." It was 100% based on my dad. He was a Red Raider every day. My dad was a giver. When he loved something, he wanted you to love it too. He loved David Hoagland. Because when I married David, I got tickets to Red Raider sporting events. My dad always wanted to take people to games and show them how great the Red Raiders were. He used David's tickets to convert as many people as he could. He loved music, movies, TV shows. We didn't really have dad jokes. We had movie quotes and song lyrics. I don't know how many times we heard, "Name the song," or "What movie is this from? This is a line. What movie is it from?" So that's why I feel certain my dad would want me to say to all of you, Frank Burns eats worms. If you're laughing, you know. If not, find me later, I'll explain. But I don't want you to think everything was always easy. We had our challenges. He never understood why I drank coffee. He said it was like drinking the oil from your car. I left my job at Texas Tech to get a graduate degree from Baylor. He did not disown me. I thought that was very good of him. I love Seinfeld, and I can quote many lines, but he didn't get it. It wasn't MASH. I had a hard time distinguishing between Paul McCartney as a solo artist and Paul McCartney as part of Wings, and that was very frustrating to him. So to his grandchildren, please remember, Paul McCartney was not only a Beatle, he was also in Wings. When we lose someone we love, we must not learn to live without them, but to live with the love that they left behind. The love he left behind is sitting right here. Spencer, you love the game, and every time you outthrow someone, your coach, Landon, you love history. Every time you watch those war movies, your coach, Catcher, you have such a big heart and a big foot. You are Coach. Cade, when you giggle with joy and happiness, you are Coach. Grant, you love music. Every time you memorize a song after hearing it one time, you are Coach. And our sweet baby Cohen, when you prank someone by saying you are John Brody, because it's coming, Chad, you are Coach. Thank you. Two of Coach's grandchildren have decided that they would like to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. My name is Landon, but you would already know that. I would just like to say a few words about my late grandfather, Coach Clifford Smith. I love history, as my mother has alluded to. And before I knew Coach had even served in the Army, I just thought he was the coolest man in the world. He was funny. He could prank someone. He would pick on my big brother for me. He would always laugh with a laugh that I will never forget. And when I learned he joined the Army, every time he would come over, "Coach, did you do this?" Or "Coach, did you do this?" Or "How about this, Coach, did you do that?" And every time he would go, "No, I just served in Germany, and it never shined there. Sun doesn't shine." Coach was a good man. He was sweet, he cared for you, and even if you were a Baylor fan, he'd still love you, but barely. Thank you.
I'm catcher, I'm Catcher Smith. Most of you already know that. And I would like to say a few words about Coach. Coach was a very good man. I didn't know too much about him until my dad told me more about him, like how he served in the Army. And every time when I would see him, I would just ask him, how was it to serve? And what was it like? And, well, he would say that what Landon said, that it doesn't shine there, the sun doesn't shine, and just
Hi, my name is Spencer. Coach, he really loved what I did. Baseball, football, basketball, all of it. But one memory that I have with him is the last time he came to visit us. After my football game, we went outside, got a football, and we started throwing it. So, I'm throwing the spiral right to him, and he throws it right back. And all of a sudden, he throws like a curveball kind of thing with the football. I'm like, what was that? And so it hits the ground, and I turn around and I go pick it up. I'm like, how'd you do that? He's like, just hold it like this and throw it. So I throw it, and it doesn't curve. And I'm like, what? Like, how did you do that? So he gets the ball, and he does it again. And I go and chase the ball, and then I throw it back, and he does the exact same thing. Now, what that taught me is that when life throws you a curveball, you have to expect it, and you have to know that it's okay if you miss. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, gosh. Hello, my name is Kate Smith. A few things I think about Coach is, one, he probably is one person I've met that never gives up. When he tries to make me and my brothers laugh, he will try every single thing, until eventually he will get it. But if he doesn't, he'll throw us on the floor and start tickling. Hey, oi, oi. So, he's just, every time I see him, he always makes us laugh, one way or another. And he never gives up. So that's one thing I like about Coach. He never gives up, and he is funny. He'd make jokes about movies, songs. I have no idea. Like some movies I don't even know existed until he talked about them. So that's what I like about Coach.
I'm McKinley, and I'm Coach's granddaughter, and I want to tell you something that I always knew about Coach when I went over to his house. Every morning when I woke up, he would be sitting in his chair, and he would ask me if I wanted donuts. I would always say yes because I love donuts. So he would go and get A&M donuts, and I always knew what he would get me. He would always get me a strawberry with sprinkles, and that's what I know about my Coach. And he loved me so much, and I knew that he really tried.
No tears in heaven, no sorrows given, all will be glory in that land. There'll be no sadness, all will be gladness, when we shall join that happy band. No tears, no tears, no tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears in heaven, no tears, no tears up there, no tears in heaven shall be known. Glory is waiting, waiting up yonder, where we shall spend an endless day. There with our Savior we'll be forever, where no more sorrow can dismay. No tears in heaven fair, no tears, no tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears in heaven fair, no tears, no tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known. Some morning yonder we'll cease to ponder o'er things this life has brought to view. All will be clearer, saved ones be dearer, in heaven where all will be made new. no tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears in heaven fair, no tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known.
I want to begin with this quote from Proverbs 13, verse 22, which says, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children." I think you just witnessed that in person. From the children to the grandchildren, that's the inheritance that he left. And inheritance, we often think about money, but in stories, and you can tell just from the heart what Cliff is about and what kind of person he was and what it meant to him to these things. Just to the person, each of you, first words out of your mouths, he was a good man. He had integrity. He chose the right thing when faced with decisions. He was kind. He reacted well to situations, and he didn't base how he treated you on how you treated him. I think that's a remarkable statement about a person, because most of us get caught up in, we do what you do to us, and we try to get you back. But that wasn't Cliff. He did not treat people that way. Very few people, I think, rise to that level, and Cliff did. As I listened to the stories the other night with the family, the word that sort of popped into my head about Cliff and sort of what my experience was he was a Renaissance man. He had a lot of interests. You know, the focus, I think, and probably at the top of the list of his gifts and talents may have been athletics and sports, because he was very gifted in that way, but he liked a lot of things. Not just athletics. He liked to talk about the weather. He would give you calls saying, you know, it may be warm this morning, but the temperature's going to drop. You might want to take a coat. Even from the hospital, he would give you those little warnings about the weather. He's always just fanatical about who had the cheapest gas prices, and make sure where you go, make sure you go to the right place to get your gas. As has been mentioned, the guessing games, songs. My favorite, by the way, Chad, was what you mentioned about the high school mascots and purple, the school colors, or wherever they might be, because I like high school mascots, but I can't hold a candle to Cliff. He blows me away when it comes to that, because we played that game, and I kept up with him for a little while, but he left me in the dust pretty quickly as well on that one there. One of the things that I liked about Cliff, he's very clever. Very, very clever and very good with words. You heard chili dip a couple of times, and I may be not saying, is it Hanyak? Is that how you say it? Am I pronouncing it? I looked it up. Did you look it up? Yeah, here's the definition of what a Hanyak is. It is a Hungarian Eastern European word. Maybe he learned it in Germany. I don't know where he got the word, but he liked to use it. It is a person who is foolish, stupid, oafish, wild, impetuous, or stubborn. It is not a compliment. So you knew that he was not very happy with either you or what you were doing at the moment when he used the word Hanyak to describe you. He did like movies, and he liked those westerns, and reminds me a little bit of my father-in-law in that regard there. I think one of his favorite shows was Bonanza, along with Gunsmoke, and he liked to watch it with people. So even when he was in the hospital, I guess that's one of the good things about technology, is you could actually watch shows together without being in the same room with each other as well. He liked dogs. Now, you may not think that that's a big deal, but I think it is, especially the way I think Cliff went about it. He had a little line. I guess he brought several dogs, or they happened to, jump in the back of the pickup truck, whatever it was, magically appearing at the house. But he would often say, "This dog followed me home." And these wouldn't necessarily be the kind of dogs that would win, was it the Westminster Kennel Show or anything else here. These were just dogs. But I think it says something about the character of Cliff. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, that came to mind when you were talking about this, but is this one. "Compassion for animals is intimately connected with goodness of character, and it may be confidently asserted that he who is cruel to animals cannot be a good man." That is from Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher. I think just the way he interacted, not just with people, but with creatures, says something about the kind of person, the kind of character that Cliff had. He's a little bit of a foodie. I don't know if he had a blog spot or anything else there, but he was a little bit of a foodie, as has been hinted at. The donuts, which I do know in at least one of the households, were not necessarily, welcome that much. But when Grandpops is in town, then donuts were okay. He was particularly liked his apple fritters, but he probably could down about any donut you put in front of him okay. He liked Nathan's hot dogs. And what you did not want to do, or I guess you did want to do, depending on your perspective, was send him to Sam's. Because he is going to come back with a lot of things that probably were not on the official list that he would wander by. And if he was in Lubbock, there might be a second trip to Costco, because Costco has certain snacks that Sam's does not, and so you might have to make a run by that as well. But he was a person who liked to live life, and he lived it very, very well. Again, your perspective depends on who you are. He was a morning person, woke up cheerfully, made breakfast. Fantastic was the word that got used to describe his breakfast-making capacity. Pancakes were his specialty, and even if he messed up because he didn't wear his glasses while looking for things and put red food coloring into pancakes, they still were delicious. But he did like to mix his sports and his food. One of the things that he told me 2 or 3 times, and he would come up to me and said, one of the best things, if you ever get a chance, you need to go to the Masters. I said, I don't have a chance to go to the Masters. I kind of said, you got to go. And he said, when you go to the Masters, not if, but when you go to the Masters, you got to get a pimento cheese sandwich. They have the best pimento cheese sandwiches. Now, if you're going to the Masters golf tournament, I don't know if any of you follow golf, but this is a pretty exclusive little deal here. It kind of shocked me that his big memory coming back from the Masters were the pimento cheese sandwiches. And they were he said, they're the best in the world. Cliff had a way and a knack for finding joy in the little things, the things that maybe we wouldn't pay much attention to. They brought joy into his life. He enjoyed going to Red Raiders game, and I got to kind of get a taste of that on our little trip there, and I made a big mistake at that game. Well, no, not a big mistake, but it was a mistake. Texas Tech won the game, so I wasn't exactly the happiest of campers that day there. He was. I got up, I was ready to leave. But you don't leave when the game is over, right? What do you got to listen for? School song, fight songs, all those things. So I got up and I started taking 2 or 3 steps, and I noticed that he wasn't following me, and I turned around. I said, okay. And so I had to pay attention to the school songs and everything else that they did, and he had his guns up as the music and the cheerleaders and the band was playing at that time. He did love his music, and he liked to tell stories about knowing Waylon Jennings. And all the things there. And I guess they were pretty good friends, not tight friends or anything else, but he did know the songs, and he could, amazingly kind of give you any line from about any song. And again, this is another place where he mixed things a little bit here, because sometimes when you play football, you practice very, very early in the morning. And there's nothing more annoying than being out in the dewy grass wet while you stretch out and everything else, and all of a sudden here comes this coach singing, "Here comes the sun, da-da-da-da," but he liked to do that. And the players would probably annoy it at the time, but later would look back upon that very, very fondly. And like all good coaches, he knew how to whistle. But apparently he took it to another level when it came to whistling. Kids knew, all right, they were either in trouble or they were lost, and they needed to come back closer to it, because he had different whistles for different occasions. And very quickly you learned to make the distinctions yourself as to exactly what it is he wanted, whether you to straighten up or to find your way back to him. He knew how to whistle. But I think on some higher levels, Cliff loved his family. And he loved unconditionally. Even if you did go off to get a degree at Baylor, he still loved you. Just make sure you don't wear any green or gold, and you'll be all right. He didn't base who you were or what you did to him on how he treated you. and he touched many, many lives. I got on the Facebook and just looked at some of the comments people were making about him. The various capacities, some of them probably weren't very good athletes, but he still touched their life, maybe in history class. Students who didn't know how to spell a word, Cliff would spell that word for them, and he would end the spelling of the word with, and for those of us who are older, we know what this is, the younger ones may or may not, M-O-U-S-C. That's how you learn to spell a word. And of course, he had to tell them, no, it doesn't actually end with M-O-U-S-C because, kids write down whatever it is you tell them to say. But he had that quick wit and that cleverness about him and that smile. The smile that could tell he was alive. He knew how to live. He knew how to live well. And he lifted you up whenever you were around him. Two places in Scripture that Cliff and I talked about a little bit, and I want to share with you as well, because I think these are different places that Cliff embodied with the way he lived out his life. But in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is teaching his disciples, and he says, "The king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who will receive good things from my Father, inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world began. I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.'" I think for Cliff, it was what you did that was so very important. The kind of person you were led to the kinds of actions that you did in your life. And when I read and scrolled down some of the comments, so many different things that talked about Cliff, but not just what Cliff said, and he had a lot of good sayings, a lot of good one-liners, but even more than that, it was what Cliff did that made such a huge difference in everybody's life, and that's why there were so many comments. And Cliff, I think, would want us all to hear this verse as well. It comes from 1 Corinthians. And one of the things that I admired about Cliff, and one of the things that I learned from him, is that he was a both-and kind of person. So many of us are either-or types. He was a both-and. And what I mean by that is, as you can tell if you got to see any of the slides, as you listened to his children and grandchildren tell stories, or anything else about Cliff, he sucked the marrow out of life. He enjoyed it. And he brought joy to others that he interacted with. He wasn't just fiddling his thumbs while he lived in this world. But Cliff, and I got to know this side of Cliff, had an eye toward the future as well. And so he's what I call a both-and kind of person. Took this life serious, but also looked forward to the next. In 1 Corinthians 15, the Apostle Paul writes these words, "Brothers and sisters, I want to call your attention to the good news that I preached to you, which you also received and in which you stand. You are being saved through it if you hold on to the message I preached to you, unless somehow you believed it for nothing. I passed on to you as most important what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in line with the Scriptures. He was buried, and he rose on the third day in line with the Scriptures." Cliff believed in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And part of that belief is not only that God had the power to raise Jesus from the dead, but God also has the power to raise Cliff and all of us here from the dead as well. And that joy that Cliff lived with in this life, he takes with him. And we will once again be able to see that smile and to hear those lines one more time. I'm going to close this with a word of prayer, and at that time we will be instructed about what to do next. Would you bow with me? Father, we give thanks for you and all that you do, and all the wonderful gifts that come from your hand. And one of those gifts is Cliff. and his life that he lived. The little lessons that he gave to his children, to his grandchildren, never stopped teaching, never stopped reaching out to them. The love that he shared with Deb, and for those of us here at Westgate who got to know him, and we also appreciated everything about him. Just talking to others today just reminded us of what it was like when Cliff came into the room, and the smile that was always there. Father, we pray that you will bless the family, all those who are mourning, those who are missing, those who are grieving right now. It is very, very sad. And we remember that Jesus wept with the mourners, and so we weep alongside them. We also pray that you will instill us a hope for the future, a hope that is embedded in the life that was lived nearly 2,000 years ago, and the life that is promised to us today. We pray your blessing upon the family and upon his friends as we remember Cliff and all that he meant to us. We give thanks to you through the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. you.